She didn't even look at me when she spoke. Her voice was low, careful, the kind you use when you want the people in the next room to hear every word. "He's been stealing from the company," she told my boss, "and he's been talking about you behind your back." I was standing in the doorway, coffee cooling in my hand, when the words landed. Not loud enough to cause a scene, but sharp enough to cut through the hum of the copier and the faint smell of toner. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening from in the comments. My name is James. I'm 48 years old, and this is what really happened. The thing about betrayal is it doesn't introduce itself. It shows up as a courtesy laugh, a harmless joke, a helpful edit to your work that somehow deletes your name. You don't see it till you taste metal on your tongue and realize your jaw's been clenched for weeks. Her name was Lisa. We weren't just coworkers, we were friends before we even shared an ID badge. We met at a coffee shop long before any of this. Rainy day, line out the door, one table left, a wobbly two-seater with a sugar packet jammed under a leg like a bandage. I offered the chair. She offered a smile. She listened when I talked, leaning in like my sentences were small boats, and she was steadying them with one finger. That's a dangerous kind of listening, the kind that learns your rhythms, your pauses, the words you reach for when you're tired. When a position opened on my team at the marketing firm, I recommended her without flinching. I'd been there over a decade. I had a name that meant give it to James and it'll get done. Bringing Lisa in felt like putting a new string on a guitar that had been playing the same song too long. For a while we sounded good together. We shared lunches, we traded small victories. She'd catch my eye in meetings when a client said something that didn't add up, and the curve of her mouth would say, "You catching this too?" I thought we were a team. But charm is a tool, and a tool can pry things open if you're not watching. The first sign didn't sting, not enough to bleed. We were prepping a pitch for a mid-size logistics client. Razor-thin margins, big volume, too many cooks stirring the brand voice. I had a line I liked, a spine for the deck, make distance feel near. In rehearsal, Lisa tried it out like a jacket. It fit her too. In the meeting she said it first. The client smiled. "Andrew, my boss wrote something on his pad." I told myself it was fine. Ideas are air. We all breathe the same air. Weeks later it happened again, only bigger. She walked a client through a framework I'd built out over 3 late nights and a Saturday morning. I watched my own slides look back at me from her laptop. Their edges softened like someone had sanded off my fingerprints. She called it her reimagining. People nodded. It's amazing how quickly a room agrees with the person holding the clicker. Let it go, I told myself on the drive home. The wipers kept time on the windshield, a slow, stubborn metronome. I cooked. I cleaned the kitchen like it insulted me. I slept badly. You can forgive a one-off. You can forgive 2 if you're generous. After 3, you're not forgiving. You're enabling. Then came the day I found a client email thread where my name had disappeared like a magician's coin. The chain started with me, ended with her. I stared at the screen, at the ... that said she was typing right then. My cursor hovered over reply all. I didn't. No good ever came from a public autopsy of a private mistake. Instead, I adjusted. I started ceasing. I started timestamping. I started keeping a thin, boring log, the kind of document no one wants until everyone needs it. I stopped confiding, stopped sending drafts, stopped letting my sentences leave my mouth before they were ready to stand on their own. But even caution can't outrun a lie that's already laced up its shoes. It was a Tuesday. Overcast morning, light like wet paper. The office smells you don't notice when you're happy were suddenly everywhere: burnt coffee, old carpet, ozone from the copier, the lemon bite of cleaner that says someone was trying to make yesterday disappear. I stepped out of my office with a paper cup and the small, ordinary intention of reheating it. That's when I heard her from the conference room. Not a raised voice, a careful one, like a surgeon choosing instruments. "He's been stealing from the company," she told Andrew. "And he's been talking about you behind your back." My first thought wasn't rage, it was math. Who hears this? What sticks? What's provable? What can be twisted? I stood still. The paper cup warmed my palm, then cooled. I watched my breath in the glass of the door and thought about the last time I'd told her anything she could sharpen into a hook. I didn't walk in. Not yet. Storming a room is theater. Theater satisfies the audience, not the record. I've learned to respect the record. It's boring. It's patient. It decides who keeps their job. She emerged a minute later, phone already in her hand. the glow of the screen painting her face with an innocence that made my teeth hurt. She didn't see me, or she saw me and chose not to. Her perfume trailed behind her like smoke from a match you thought you pinched out. Andrew was inside, hands folded, the legal pad in front of him, a small beige country where a lot of fates had been mapped. "Close the door," he said. The click of that latch is a sound I won't forget. He didn't offer me a seat. I sat anyway. He didn't accuse me. He didn't absolve me. He looked at me like he had a box of pieces and was still deciding which picture they made. "She says you've been stealing," he said, eyes steady. "Do you believe her?" I asked. He breathed out through his nose, a slow, almost amused sound. "I believe in proof," he said, "and I believe in patterns. There are sentences that stick in your ribs." That was one. Proof. Patterns. Two words that don't care how you feel. He asked me to walk him through the last quarter. Big projects, who owned what, where the lines blurred. I did. Cleanly. No commentary. When I finished, he didn't say much. He tapped the pad with his pen. Once, twice. Then he slid a small manila envelope across the table. My name was on the tab in Andrew's neat block letters. Inside were printouts of 3 anonymous tips HR had received in the last month. Each accused me of a different sin: misreporting expenses, back-channeling clients, sabotaging internal reviews. Each used language I recognized, not because I'd written it, but because I'd heard it from Lisa in meetings, in jokes, in that airy way she had of making a knife look like a ribbon. "Do you want to tell me anything?" Andrew asked. I looked at the pages, looked at him. "No," I said. "I want to show you." In that moment a strange calm settled. I didn't feel vindicated, didn't feel hunted. I felt responsible. Responsible for the record I'd kept. Responsible for the quiet I'd maintained. Loyalty isn't a handshake, a mentor told me once. It's the silence after a rumor when you choose not to repeat it. The line floated up now like a buoy. I told Andrew I needed a day. Not to scramble, to collect. He nodded. "You'll have it," he said. "And James." He paused, weighing the next part. "Keep this between us." I left his office and the hallway felt narrower, like the building had exhaled and forgotten to inhale again. People were moving in their usual loops. Coffee, copy, chatter, Slack pings like tiny woodpeckers pecking the skull. Lisa was at her desk, bent over her phone, thumbs quick, posture loose. She had a gift for looking unbothered. I went back to my office and opened the boring log. I added lines, dates, times. I pulled purchase orders, sifted calendar invites, downloaded email headers, because sometimes proof is less about what's in a message and more about where it came from, when, and who else was supposed to see it. Late afternoon, I opened a draft proposal and planted a ghost. A fake client name. A fake budget number with a pattern I would recognize if it walked by wearing a hat. I saved it to a shared folder with access logging enabled. Our IT team had rolled out the feature months earlier, and most people treated it like a seatbelt on a short drive. I buckled mine. I didn't go home on time. I walked the floor instead. The carpet changed texture near the finance cubicles. Tighter weave, harder underfoot. The air was cooler by the server room. I stopped in the break area and listened to the soda machine hum like a distant generator. Sometimes you need the noise to drown out the story in your head. On my desk, under a coaster, there's a small coin my father gave me when I started at the firm. Not worth anything. A beat-up token from a defunct subway line in a city we used to live in. He said, "Keep this where you work. When your hands shake, hold it." My hands weren't shaking, but I held it anyway. Some objects are anchors. They don't keep you from moving. They keep you from drifting. The next morning I was early. I watched the access logs populate over coffee that tasted like burnt walnuts. Names blinked on and off as people opened the shared folder for the weekly deck. The creative assets, the legal boilerplate no one reads. At 8:43 a name hit the ghost file that had no business being there. Not the first time I'd seen her there. The first time it mattered. I took a breath so slow it felt like the building did it with me. At 9:12 in the bullpen, Lisa laughed at something a junior said and tossed her hair like a TV commercial. At 9:30 she walked by my door and for a second our eyes met. If she knew she was in the trap, she didn't show it. Predators don't believe in traps until their foot hurts. In the afternoon a client called to reschedule. Small thing. Not connected. But as I hung up, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Check your email." In my inbox a forwarded chain from a vendor. The top message was from Lisa to their rep, copying the vendor's personal Gmail instead of the company address. The ask was subtle, a pricing sheet for review that undercut the proposal I'd built. The timestamp overlapped with a meeting she had to help me polish the deck. Nothing I couldn't explain. Nothing she couldn't either. This is how doubt wins. Not with a smoking gun, with a fog machine. I didn't confront her. I saved it. Saved everything. By the end of the week I had a stack. Access logs. Calendar entries where she'd blocked time as client follow-up on days I knew the client had been in transit. A comment thread where she corrected my math by moving a decimal, then praised herself for catching the error. Small cuts? All. Small cuts can kill if you don't stop the bleeding. Friday, 5:38 p.m. The office thin with the people who leave their desks like they're escaping a fire. Andrew appeared in my doorway with his legal pad. He looked tired. Not of me, of being the person who carries everyone else's storms. You said you'd show me, he said. I showed him. Not everything. Not yet. Enough to move the needle from concern to action. He didn't praise. Didn't warn. Just said, email me the files. I'll loop in HR quietly. Then he held up a hand like he'd remembered something he'd meant to forget. One more thing, he said. Those anonymous tips? I traced the submission workstation. We can't name anyone yet. But the IP sits on our floor. Our floor, not finance. Not sales. Ours. I didn't sleep well that weekend. I baked bread. I didn't want and cleaned a garage that wasn't dirty. I walked my block at night and listened to sprinklers tick like steady lies. I thought about friendship and how it sours in stages like milk left one shelf too far from the fridge fan. I thought about pride and how it makes you say this can't be happening to me, when the truth is it can happen to anyone who trusts the wrong person the right amount of time. Sunday evening the sky went that color between blue and black where the streetlights look embarrassed to turn on. I ironed a shirt, set out my shoes, put the subway token in my pocket instead of under the coaster. A small change, not for luck, for Monday morning came with a hard light and the smell of rain that didn't arrive. I sent Andrew a tidy email with links to the folder I'd titled in the most boring way possible. Q3 documentation. Internal. Then I walked to the kitchen, poured coffee, and came back slow enough to think but not slow enough to look like I was thinking. At my door Lisa was waiting. She leaned in the frame like a painting of someone comfortable everywhere. You free for 5? She asked. I am not proud of what happened next. I smiled. I said sure. I let her sit. I let her talk about weekend hikes and a new ramen place and how we should stop by sometime after the big pitch next month. She used to feel like it was a rope around my chest that she could pull when she wanted me closer or push when she wanted me off balance. I watched her hands. They never stilled. Hands tell the truth even when the mouth can't remember how. She drifted toward work talk like it was an accident. Asked how I was structuring our case study section. What I thought the client would respond to emotionally. If I had any rough phrasing she could smooth. Her voice was butter. Her eyes were knives. I'll send you the draft when it's ready, I said. She laughed soft. You always were old school, James. I let the line pass. Old school will keep you alive. When she left, a junior analyst popped his head in. Lisa asked for the Q3 deck on the shared drive, he said. I sent the link. Is that cool? Yeah, I said. That's cool. At 10:41 a.m., the ghost file opened again. At 10:44, an internal chat pinged. Hey, quick question about Carriage Finch Logistics. Is that a new prospect or a code name? I typed. Draft. Please ignore for now. Then I watched the typing bubbles on the other side blink and die. The rest of the day was asphalt heat and fluorescent fatigue. At 4:12 I printed the access logs. Paper is heavy. Heavy is credible. At 4:19 I printed an email from a client that made my throat go cold. A polite note that said Lisa had reached out to ease the transition if James is moving on, and could she take over personally. Transition. Moving on. Words that show up before a loss you didn't agree to. I put the prints in a plain folder. I locked the bottom drawer. I turned off my monitor with the small satisfaction of choosing the moment your screen goes dark. The building at dusk sounds different. The vents stop sounding like breath and more like ocean. Chairs complain when they're empty. Motion sensors blink like lazy stars. I stood at the window and looked at the city that has no opinion of me. That's the only honest mirror some days. When I finally left, the elevator was empty, except for my reflection and the faint ghost of a fingerprint on the stainless steel that didn't belong to me. I pressed the lobby button with my knuckle like my father taught me during flu season. The doors closed slow, the way doors do when you want them to hurry. That night I sat at my kitchen table with the token under my thumb and wrote 3 sentences on a yellow legal pad. Not a manifesto. Not a plan. 3 simple commitments. Keep the record clean. Let her talk. Don't flinch. I slept. Not well. Enough. Tuesday I carried the folder into Andrew's office and set it down like any other piece of paper. No speech. No preamble. He opened it. He read. He didn't look up for a long time. "This stays between us," he said again, but softer. Then he picked up his phone and dialed HR. "Carol," he said when she answered, "I need you to start a preliminary review." Quietly. And Carol pulled the submission metadata on those anonymous tips. All of it. He hung up and leaned back. For a moment he closed his eyes like a man who'd been juggling with knives and was finally ready to let them drop where they may. When he opened them, they were clear. "James," he said, "for now do exactly what you've been doing. Keep working. Keep documenting. I'll handle the rest." I stood to go. My hand was on the knob when he added almost casually, "Oh, if anyone asks, you and I are discussing resource allocation." "Not this." He tapped the folder. "Not yet." I stepped into the hall and the office looked the same as it had yesterday, and the day before and last month. Same desks, same plants starving under wrong light, same people walking the same routes with the same jokes, but the air had shifted. Just a notch. Like a room right before a storm when the dog lifts its head and looks at the door. At my desk, the token went back under the coaster. I opened my inbox. A new email was waiting. Subject line: performance concern, follow-up required. From H. I clicked. It was short. A request to meet. A list of topics that read like a mirror held to the worst angle of my week. At the bottom a note: please bring any documentation you feel is relevant to your performance and client interactions over the past quarter. I read it again. Then I looked up through the glass wall of my office and watched Lisa glide past with a calm so smooth it made my skin itch. That's when I noticed the last line. In small font. Easy to miss. "This meeting is confidential. Please do not share details with other employees. Submitted concerns will be addressed in sequence per policy." Plural. Concerns. Not one. Several. Sequence. A line I was standing in without knowing it. I didn't sit back down. I walked to Andrew's door and knocked once. He looked up. I held up my phone so he could see the subject line. He nodded. "I know," he said. "I asked them to send it." I waited for the rest. It came slow, like ice cracking. "Because if we're going to do this," he said, "we're going to do it right. And James," he paused, "the IP on those anonymous tips? Its early pull says the machine name matches one user's laptop when docked." He slid a sticky note across his desk. On it, a single word. A name. Lisa. Andrew didn't say the name out loud. He didn't have to. The sticky note sat between us like a small yellow verdict. I stared at it longer than necessary. Not for drama, but because I wanted the ink to burn into my memory in case I needed to recall the exact way his capital L hooked and whether he dotted his I high or low. Details matter when stories get contested. "Thank you," I said. He nodded once. "HR at 2. Bring your documents. Keep your answers clean. Always," I said, and left. Back in my office I shut the door and listened to the HVAC hum. A steady breath through metal lungs. I pulled the folder from the bottom drawer and set it on the desk like a plain meal before a long day. There's a quiet ritual to getting ready for an HR meeting when you know you're not the problem. You sort, you trim, you remove the fireworks and leave the fuse. Proof doesn't need pyrotechnics. Proof needs order. I stacked the access logs by date. Clipped the client emails together with a note on top that read "Sequence matters. See timestamps." Printed headers from the anonymous tip system showing submission times, then circled the ones that lined up with Lisa's calendar blocks labeled heads down time. At 1:42, I took out my father's old subway token and rolled it across my knuckles. The brass had gone almost smooth with age, edges softened by 1,000 pockets. When your hands shake, hold it. Mine weren't, but I held it anyway. Some anchors you keep near even when the sea looks flat. At 1:54 I walked to HR. The hallway smelled like lemon cleaner and carpet glue. Someone had microwaved fish on another floor, and the scent rode the elevator shaft like a rumor. HR's door had that frosted glass that makes everyone look softer than they are. I knocked. "Come in," Carol called. She was ready for me. Folder open, pen poised. The company handbook on a stand like a choir book. She gestured to the chair. Thanks for coming prepared. Thank you for being careful, I said. She didn't smile exactly. We try. There's an art to HR conversations. The questions curl around things rather than stabbing at them. Help me understand. Walk me through. From your perspective. They're calibrated so the transcript will sound fair, even to someone who wasn't in the room. I answered clean dates, times, names only when necessary. When I slid the access logs across, Carol ran her finger down the usernames the way someone site rids Ricks. Our system records open events within 1 minute granularity, she said. You're aware? I am. She tapped a line where Lisa's name showed against a file stamped confidential finance review. You weren't sharing this. No. Assigned access? Limited to me and Andrew. That was all. But it wasn't nothing. I set the client email on top of the pile. The one about transition, if James is moving on. She read it once, twice, then made a small mark in the margin I couldn't see. You didn't tell this client you were leaving. No. Is there a chance someone could reasonably believe you were? Not unless they wanted to believe that on purpose. She stopped writing and looked up. On purpose? On purpose, I said. Some lies don't aim to convince. They aim to corrode. You don't need a yes, if you can get a maybe. She wrote that down verbatim. I didn't mean it as a quotable. Sometimes the truth lands with its own punctuation. When it was Carol's turn, she asked without inflection. Do you have any reason to think the anonymous tips came from Lisa? I didn't point at Andrew's sticky note in my pocket. I didn't name the laptop doc. I have reason to think they came from someone with access to our floor, our files, and my calendar, I said. I have reason to think the language matches phrases she has used in meetings. Carol nodded. A small, almost private motion. We'll look at the language, she said, and the metadata. Thank you. She closed her folder with a sound that felt like the end of a chapter. While this review is ongoing, I'm going to recommend some boundaries. No one-on-one closed-door conversations between you and Lisa. Include a third person for any necessary project exchanges. Keep your communication in writing. You comfortable with that? Very. Good. We'll reach out if we need clarification. I stood, then paused with my hand on the back of the chair. Carol, I said, there's one more thing. Yes? I don't want a spectacle, I said. I don't need one. Her face softened a fraction. Spectacle helps no one, she said. We're not in the business of public theater. I believed her, or wanted to. I left the office lighter by one folder and heavier by a timeline I couldn't control. In the hallway, I almost ran into Lisa. She had a paper cup in one hand and a file in the other. She stepped aside as if we were strangers at a hotel corridor, and flashed a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Busy day? She asked. Doing the job, I said. Always, she said, and drifted past, the citrus of her perfume peeling away as she went. Back at my desk, I found a calendar invitation waiting. Resource allocation, weekly sync. Andrew, 30 minutes. Recurring. He'd given us our cover story. I accepted. Then I stood and walked the floor. It's a habit I picked up years ago when I realized the most important things people say are said on their feet and in motion. Desks make people perform. Hallways make them forget they're performing. I paused at creative, where the interns were arguing in good faith about fonts. I nodded to finance, where someone had taped a cartoon to the printer complaining about toner. I lingered near the glass wall of the small conference room where Lisa had once pitched my framework with her fingerprints wiped off. On my way back, a junior analyst in 2 years out of school, always earnest, caught up to me. Hey James. Quick thing. Walk with me, I said. He did. So, Lisa asked me to send her the raw survey polls from last quarter, he said, voice low like it was contraband. I didn't see her on the request list, but she said she was helping you. She isn't, I said. In the future, if you don't see her name, don't send. Got it, he said, swallowing. Did I mess up? No, I said. You fixed it by telling me. He nodded, and I could see the relief wheel right through him. The shoulders drop, the breath come back. There are small kindnesses in offices that cost you nothing and give people a day back. At 4:06, a message chimed in my inbox from a client we'd both worked with in the spring. Heard about some internal changes. All good? There was no malice in it, just curiosity taught by gossip. I replied short, all good. I'll be your point person. Per usual, let's lock Thursday for the Q4 planning call. Then I called Andrew and said, the rumors have left the building. Understood, he said. Keep receipts. Receipts I had. But receipts don't stop a leak. You need a wrench. That night I went home and spread my notes across the kitchen table. The wood so scarred with old water rings that every page looked like it was sitting in a target. I wasn't planning revenge. I was planning repairs. People get that confused. Getting even is a story you tell yourself when you want to feel active. Getting right is what you do when you want to sleep. I wrote 3 lists. What I can prove now. What I can likely prove with help. What I will never prove and must learn to live with. In the last column I wrote only one word. Motive. You don't always get that. People will carry their why into the ground with them. That doesn't mean you let them carry your job too. I slept with the window open. The night smelled like wet asphalt and cut grass. Somewhere 2 blocks over. A dog barked, then apologized with silence. I dreamt of a corridor of doors, all the same. All locked and a key that opened each but only once. Morning came with a washed sky and the taste of metal on my tongue. I left early, rode the Avirva with a janitor whistling something I almost recognized, and turned on my office lamp before the overheads buzzed on. I like the first hour. Emails wear their night clothes and haven't learned to shout. At 8:07, an internal memo hit everyone's inbox. Carol's name at the bottom, subject audit of project handling, Q3 to present. The text was clean, neutral. Phrases like routine review, process improvement, best practice. It was the opposite of spectacle. A curtain hung so the crew could change the set without the audience seeing the scramble. By 10 you could feel the shift. People sat straighter. Laughter got quiet. Slack slowed. We all know what process improvement means when the air tastes like lemon and worry. At noon, Andrew called me in and closed the door. It pulled the submission metadata, he said without preamble. He slid a paper across the desk. A simple table, 3 columns, timestamp, IP, machine name. The last column had a 4-word label you could map to a person if you worked here longer than a week. Lisa's docking station, 3 submissions. Understood, I said. We will treat this as preliminary, he said out loud for the gods of policy to hear. Then I'm moving her off your accounts. Effective now. The part of me loosened. I didn't realize it had been clenched. Thank you, James, he said softer. You've handled this professionally. He almost smiled. Old school works. Old school keeps records, I said. He nodded. One more thing. The audit team is finding irregularities with time logs on 2 accounts she touched before she joined your team. Different managers. Similar patterns. This may broaden. That word can be a warning or a promise. I took it as both. We planned the next week like a small campaign. Who would communicate what? How to route client questions. Which Slack channels to sunset, so the gossip didn't have a megaphone. Andrew asked me to draft a memo to our direct clients, affirming continuity. I wrote it with the bland, sturdy language of an airline pilot. We know this sky, we've flown this route. Turbulence will settle. At 2:30, Carol requested a follow-up. Quick clarification on document access. 15 minutes. No drama. I walked over. She asked her 2 questions. I answered. On my way back I passed the small huddle room we all pretend is soundproof. Lisa was inside, back to the glass, phone to her ear, laughing too loud for someone not performing. The laughter stopped when her eyes found me. We looked at each other through the frost of tempered glass and company policy. She gave me a look I couldn't parse then. Half defiance, I kept walking. By Thursday the audit had pulled enough thread that the sweater started to give. 2 client accounts resurfaced with notes that didn't match the official timeline. An internal test plan had been edited in a way that shifted blame for a missed metric. The edit history showing a familiar username at an odd hour. None of it alone would crack the floor. Together it creaked. Late that afternoon the thing I didn't expect arrived. Not an email. A knock. Nut stood at my door, pale around the mouth. He stepped in and closed it behind him with the care of someone shutting a nursery door. James, he said, voice too steady to be steady. I think I messed up. I put my pen down. Okay. She asked me for the raw survey pulls again, he said. I told her I couldn't send them without your okay. She said it was urgent, and she'd clear it with you after. I still said no, but she asked if I could hop on her laptop to help her unzip something because her machine was acting weird. He swallowed. I did. I typed my network password to authorize the unzip. Then I left for like 5 minutes. When I came back, She was logged into the shared drive. You saw your credentials still active? I asked. He stared at the carpet. Yes. I felt the air go thin. Not because I was surprised, because the shape of the thing was finally clear. You did the right thing telling me, I said. Am I fired? No, I said. You're helping fix a problem. Sit. He sat. I talked. Slow, simple. We would loop it. He would write exactly what happened, and only what happened. He would not talk about it in the kitchen, at the printer, on Slack, or to his roommate. He nodded like a bobblehead, too fast to be natural, but I could see his breathing slow. When he left, I called Andrew. We have a credential reuse issue, I said. He didn't ask for details. He just said, bring Nate. Conference room B. 5 minutes. It came. Carol came. Andrew stood at the end of the table, arms folded. A man tired of his own restraint. Nate told the story clean, no flourishes. It asked for the laptop. Carol asked for the exact time. Andrew asked for my logs for the last week. We gave them everything. While they talked, I watched Lisa at her desk through the glass. She was typing, not the aimless pecking of someone answering Slack. The determined head-down rhythm of someone moving files where they shouldn't be. Her face was calm, cheeks unflushed, like she had decided something and her body had fallen in line. Okay, Carol said, and the room's temperature dropped a degree. We're going to collect her device now. Now, Andrew said. They moved like a small, well-trained unit. It at the lathe, Carol beside, Andrew behind. I stayed in the room. There are lines you don't cross if you want the story to ring true later. Through the glass, I watched the approach. Lisa looked up when the shadow fell across her desk. Her smile came first, then the tilt of her head, then the slow set of her mouth when she understood. She said something I couldn't hear. Carol said something back that made the edges of Lisa's shoulders harden. It pointed to the dock. Lisa unclipped cables with more force than she needed. The machine went into a gray bag with a zipper that sounded like a verdict. They walked her to conference I'll aimed. Not the small rooms. The big one. The one where we bring clients where we want to impress. There's a humiliation in that, but it wasn't mine to solve. 10 minutes later, Andrew came back. He closed the door and leaned against it like he needed it to hold him up. We'll be doing a custodial interview, he said. It will mirror the drive. Audit continue. Understood, I said. James, he added, you did well keeping this quiet. Quiet is the only thing that beats a rumor, I said. He almost smiled. Put that in a handbook. I went back to my office and sat alone with the sound of the building. The lights hummed. The vents hissed somewhere. A drawer shut with too much force. Somewhere else, someone laughed too loud. The way people do when they are trying to outrun a thought. I opened my notebook and wrote a single line. If it were you, would you forgive or forget? Then I closed it. This wasn't a forgiveness story. By evening, the floor had thinned to the people who live more at work than home. I stood by the window and watched the city sort itself into lights, each one a person who believed they were the center of a small, serious world. It's a comforting lie on some nights. On others, it's a relief to know you're not. I shut off my lamp and picked up my bag. The token was warm from my pocket. In the elevator, a stranger asked if I was staying out of the drama. I said, doing my best, because that's the right answer to people who don't own any part of your story. When I stepped onto the sidewalk, the air had a bite. The smell of rain finally matched the sky. I walked 2 blocks before I realized I'd left without my umbrella. I didn't go back. Some things you just let get wet. I slept like someone who had done everything he could for one day. Morning would come. It did. At 8:15, a company-wide email blinked into being. From HR, neutral subject line. Inside, 2 sentences that said very little, and everything at once. Effective immediately, an employee has been placed on administrative leave, pending completion of an internal review. For privacy reasons, we will not be commenting further. The close was boilerplate. The effect was not. By 10, clients were emailing me to confirm our 1-1s. By noon, the audit team asked for my help reconstructing an older account timeline. By 2, IT pinged Andrew they had found something of interest. He called me in. On the table lay a printout, directory listings, file names, timestamps. Most were ordinary. One wasn't. A folder had been created on Lisa's machine 2 months ago, tucked behind an innocuous name. Inside were copies of decks, pricing sheets, and drafts. Some were mine, some belonged to projects she'd never been assigned to. A subfolder carried a vendor's name followed by the word personal. Andrew tapped it with a dull pencil. "This is where it hardens," he said. "Vendor communication to a non-corporate address. Off-channel." "What does she say they are?" I asked. "She says she was preparing contingencies in case I made changes," he said. And the word contingencies felt like a piece of glass in my mouth. I nodded. "You'll do what you have to do." He nodded back. He looked older than yesterday. We all did. At 4, they walked her out. Security didn't touch her. They didn't need to. She kept her eyes forward and her chin level and her mouth in a line she must have practiced. She carried a single cardboard box with nothing heavy in it. No plants. No picture frames. The box of someone who never intended to stay. She didn't look at me. I didn't expect her to. The door closed behind her with the same honest click as every other day. There was no cheer on the floor. No high fives. No satisfaction you could photograph. Places that survive don't celebrate collapses. They mark them and keep moving. I stayed late. Answered what needed answering. Cleaned what needed cleaning. At 7:12, as I was about to shut my computer, a new email arrived from a client I hadn't heard from in months. The one who'd left us after a sudden change in communication. The subject line was polite. The first sentence was not unkind. The second made me sit back. "We're reconsidering our agency relationship. If you're available to discuss taking point again, we'd like to talk." I stared at it until the words steadied. Then I replied with 3 lines that said yes without saying please. When I hit send, I didn't feel triumph. I felt alignment. That's rarer than victory. I turned off the lamp and let the room go dim. The token lay under my palm, warm as if it had a pulse. I thought some people call it justice. I call it necessary. Then I slid the token back into my pocket and picked up my coat. As the elevator doors began to close, a hand shot in to stop them. Andrew. He stepped in, pressed lobby, then leaned back against the wood paneling like it still had answers. "One last thing," he said. I waited. "Its mirror turned up an external draft," he said. "A pitch deck with our work reskinned. Different logo on the cover. A competitor's last modified 8 days ago." The elevator hummed. The floor count ticked down. Somewhere inside me something clicked into a fendered gear. "She was shopping our work," I said. It wasn't a question. He nodded once. "We're speaking with legal in the morning." We rode the last floors in silence. The doors opened to the lobby in the cool formal air of a building that doesn't care about your personal weather. At the revolving door he said, "Get some rest." "I will." Outside, the rain had started. A clean, steady sheet. I stepped into it without flinching. Cold water on a warm face. The kind of rain that makes a city smell like stone and electricity. I didn't speed up. You can't outrun what you've already walked toward. Half a block down, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. Then curiosity pulled. I listened under an awning. A voice I knew but couldn't place at first. One of our vendors, the rep who used his personal Gmail too often. His message was short. He'd like to clarify some things about requests that were made and documents that were forwarded off-channel. He wanted to do the right thing before it becomes a thing. I looked up at the rain. Some nights give you a new key when you thought the corridor of doors had ended. I hit call back. He answered on the first ring, voice thin with relief. "James? Thank God. I didn't know who." "You picked right," I said. "Start at the beginning. Tell me everything. Dates, times, what she asked for, what you sent, and where." He started talking. I listened. I didn't interrupt. When he ran out of words, I said, "You're going to send me those emails. All of them, from the account you used. And then you're going to forward them to HR. Today." Okay. "Yes. Today." "Good," I said. "There's one more thing." "What?" "You're going to send an email to your corporate address from that personal account that says, 'Per your request, here's the pricing sheet I sent on date.' And you're going to CC Carol in HR. Copy me." Silence. Then, "Okay." We hung up. I stood there long enough for the rain to flatten my hair and soak the cuffs of my sleeves. Then I started walking again. Not faster, not slower, just forward. Back in my apartment, I left my wet coat on the back of a chair and set my phone face down on the table. I poured a glass of water and drank it like a man trying not to want anything stronger. I sat. I breathed. I waited. At 9:06, the emails started arriving. They came in a line. Dates, times, subject lines that matched my gut. Lisa's name. the vendor's personal account, attachments whose hashes would match ours. I forwarded them to Carol with no commentary. Then I texted Andrew 3 words. "You'll want this." The phone lit up. "We do, 3 dots. Call at 7 a.m. I put the token on the table and set my palm on it. The brass was cool now. I thought about what comes after winning. Maintenance. The hard, unsung work of keeping a thing right after you forced it to become right. It's less cinematic. It lasts longer. I cleaned the kitchen. It didn't need it. I turned off lights until the apartment was a shape in the dark that felt like mine again. I let myself think about forgiveness for the length of one breath. I still can't decide if walking away was strength or cowardice. Then I decided I didn't have to decide tonight. I slept. Morning arrived like a verdict. Plain, inevitable. At 6:55 my phone vibrated. Andrew already on the bridge with legal and Carol. I joined. Voices clicked in. Coffee poured somewhere on someone's end. We walked the vendor's emails through like evidence in a quiet courtroom. Legal asked their hard questions. The answers were harder. At 7:38 there was a pause. Then legal said, "We'll notify her of cause. Termination stands. We will also notify the competitor. If they've taken delivery of any of our material they will cease and desist or see us in court." I didn't smile. It isn't that kind of win. After the call I stared at the ceiling until the faint cracks looked like a map. Then I got dressed and went to work. People didn't ask. I didn't tell. There was a kindness in the silence I hoped we'd keep. Around noon, a courier arrived with a thick envelope for Andrew. I saw the return address and knew what it contained. The competitor's letter, their lawyer's cooling language, their denial paired with the promise to destroy any inadvertently received materials. Adults apologizing without admitting fault. That's as much as you ever get. At 3:12, Carol stopped in my doorway. "We'll be closing the review on your side this week," she said. "You'll get a formal letter. Clean." "Thank you," I said. "You earned it," she said. Then quieter. "Not everyone handles a storm like this without making thunder." "Thunder is for audiences," I said. "I'm not playing to one." She nodded and left. At 5:01 my inbox chimed again. The client who'd left months ago. "Let's proceed. Contract attached. We'd like you to lead." I printed the signature page and set it on my desk. Paper still means something. The pen felt good in my hand. I didn't think of Lisa. That's not strictly true. I thought of the rain on the day they walked her out and how her box didn't look heavy. Some endings don't weigh anything until you have to carry them. I shut down for the day, turned off the lamp, picked up the token and slipped it into my pocket. In the elevator I watched my reflection blur in the brushed steel. A man. A suit. A face. A story. Not the whole truth. Enough of it. My phone buzzed with a number I didn't recognize. I let it go. It buzzed again. I answered. "James?" The voice was thin, familiar, stretched. "Lisa." I didn't say anything. She filled the silence. "I shouldn't be calling," she said. "They told me not to." "Then why are you?" "Because this isn't how it was supposed to go," she said. Her laugh was small and wrong. "You weren't supposed to what?" "To stay," she said. "To win." We let that word hang between us like a bad light bulb. She took a breath. "They're saying you're going to press charges." "I'm not saying anything," I said. "And I'm not the days you're talking to." "James." The way she said my name made it sound like a word she'd mispronounced on purpose for years. "You could say I'm sorry." "I could," I said. "I won't." Silence. Then, quieter. "I didn't think you'd fight me with paperwork." "Paperwork," I said, "is just the truth with a date stamp." A car horn bled through her end of the call, somewhere a siren. Somewhere else. A laugh. "Goodbye, Lisa," I said. "Wait," she said, sharp enough to nick. "You don't even want to know why." "No," I said. "I want to go home." I ended the call. I stepped out into evening. The city exhaled. The street smelled like hot tar, and whatever restaurants do to garlic to make it smell like memory. I walked without checking my reflection in the windows. I already knew what I looked like, a man telling the truth because he is tired of carrying it alone. When I reached my building, the doorman nodded. His small, steady ritual. "Rained yesterday," he said. "Not today." "Not today," I said and went inside. Upstairs I put the token back under the coaster and poured a glass of water. Outside 2 pigeons argued on the ledge like old couples who have given up on winning and now fight to keep busy. I'll let them be the noise. My phone buzzed one last time. A new voicemail. I pressed play. Already braced. It wasn't Lisa. It was the vendor again. Voice calmer now. He'd documented everything, he said. He'd learned a lesson. He'd appreciate a chance to keep working together. He'd earned a second chance. People like to name their hope out loud to make it feel real. I deleted the message without saving it. I'd decide tomorrow. Tonight I wanted quiet. I stood at the window until the city clicked into its night geometry, light, dark, a rhythm old as the grid. I thought about how humiliation moves through a building like a draft under a door, and how dignity is something you have to hold to your chest with both hands if you want to keep it warm. I turned away and the room came with me. And then my phone lit up with a subject line I wasn't expecting. The kind that makes the air theme for a different reason. Suboina, notice to produce. From legal. Not ours. A state seal at the top of the attached PDF. Like a stare. It wasn't addressed to me alone. The recipient's line included the competitor's legal team and our vendor's company counsel. The body was 3 sentences long and as gentle as a brick. Produce all communications, drafts, and materials related to the following accounts and individuals, including any off-channel correspondence, dates that bridged before and after Lisa's hire, names that weren't hers. I read it twice, then a third time. The corridor of doors stretched again. Somewhere, another lock turned. The subpoena sat on my screen. Black letters on white, but it might as well have been a flare in the dark. I could feel the hum of my laptop through the desk. Steady, mechanical, but my pulse had started syncing with it. It wasn't just her name. There were others. Managers from before my time on certain accounts. Vendors I'd worked with but never fully trusted. The scope wasn't narrow. This wasn't just about Lisa anymore. I leaned back and let my eyes go out of focus. When you've been in corporate long enough, you know what these things mean. The story has left the building. It's not just whispers in conference rooms or HR interviews anymore. It's courtrooms. Lawyers with fountain pens, stamped envelopes that become part of a public record. And public records don't forget. I forwarded the subpoena to Andrew with 2 words. Got it. He replied almost instantly. Call in 10. When I joined the bridge, his voice was lower than usual. Legal says this is broader than we thought. They're pulling every thread that touches those accounts. How deep? I asked. Back 5 years. Maybe more. That landed heavier than I expected. 5 years meant digging through seasons of my career, long before Lisa even walked into our office with her coffee and her charm. You're named as a custodian, Andrew said. Means you've got relevant files. We'll help you collect, but you're on the hook to produce everything from your work devices and accounts for that period. Fine, I said. It's clean. I know, he said. But it's going to get messy before it's clean again. When the call ended, I sat there for a long minute, my hand resting on the coaster that hid the subway token. The last time I'd felt this combination, relief that my record was solid, and dread that the process would drag every shadow into the light, was years ago during a vendor dispute that almost cost us a client. Back then I didn't have enemies inside the building. Now, the ghosts were still walking the halls. Even if Lisa was gone. By noon, legal had sent me the first batch of instructions. Every file with the listed keywords. Every email thread containing the named parties. Every shared drive folder that touched those accounts. I opened my archive and started sorting. The hum of the overhead lights and the faint tap-tap of keyboards in the bullpen became background static. My world narrowed to subject lines and timestamps. Some threads were harmless, routine check-ins, meeting invites, harmless chatter about weather delays. Others carried the faint smell of trouble. A clarification email from a vendor that rephrased deliverables in a way that shifted liability. A client request routed through a personal Gmail. A PDF with our logo stripped and replaced with another's. I didn't just save them. I printed the most suspicious ones and clipped them into a manila folder labeled possible irregularities. Paper still carries more weight in the right hands. At 3:15, Carol from HR stopped by my door. She didn't sit. Legal wants to meet with you tomorrow morning, she said. Bring what you've collected so far. They'll handle the rest. Her tone was steady, but I caught the flicker in her eyes. This wasn't just a formality anymore. Before she left, she added, the vendor you spoke to last night. He called me this morning, said he's willing to sign a statement. That's good, I said. It is, she said, but he's scared. Someone's leaning on him hard. Lisa? I asked. Carol's pause was just long enough to answer without answering. We'll find out. The rest of the afternoon, I worked with a new kind of focus. I wasn't just protecting myself now. I was preparing a map for someone else to follow. Every file, every date, every coincidence lined up like points on a constellation. And when you see the shape, you can't unsee it. At 6:42, I shut down my laptop. The office was mostly dark, except for a glow from Andrew's corner. I knocked once and stepped in. "They'll get her," he said before I could open my mouth. "Maybe," I said. "But they might get others too." He nodded, eyes tired. "That's the point." I placed the manila folder on his desk. He didn't open it, just rested his hand on it like it was already part of the chain of custody. "James," he said, "when this is over there will be people who think you won because you had the better story." "And the truth?" I asked. He almost smiled. "The truth is just the story that survives the paperwork." When I left the building, the night air smelled like hot asphalt and faint rain. Somewhere behind me, lights stayed on in the offices. Somewhere ahead, the streetlights buzzed, drawing moths that didn't know they'd burn if they got too close. I walked slow, not because I was tired, because I knew I was carrying something heavier than the folder. And the next morning, I'd have to put it on the table. The next morning, I arrived at the office before the sun had burned the dew off the sidewalks. The glass in the lobby still held the faint ghost of last night's rain, blurring the city outside like an old photograph. I swiped my badge, heard the soft click of the lock, and stepped into the quiet. My meeting with legal was set for 8 a.m., but I needed time to think without the buzz of keyboards and the shuffle of colleagues pretending not to watch. I took the subway token from under its coaster and rolled it across my knuckles, the brass warm from yesterday's pocket heat. My father's voice, faint but steady in memory. "When your hands shake, hold it." They weren't shaking, but today felt like a day that could try to change that. At 7:52, Carol appeared at my door. "You ready?" she asked. "Depends on the questions," I said. She smiled, thin but genuine. "They're not here to trip you up. They want the map." We walked together to conference room B, neutral territory. Not the big one reserved for clients, not the small ones where gossip blooms. This one had glass walls and blinds half drawn, just enough to make it feel like you could speak without being overheard, but not so much that it felt secret. Inside, 2 lawyers from the firm's outside counsel sat waiting, laptops open, pens aligned parallel to yellow legal pads. Andrew was there too, in the corner, flipping through a binder. "James," one of the lawyers said, standing just enough to acknowledge me. "Thanks for coming in early." I slid my manila folder onto the table. "It's all in here, printed and digital copies. Files are indexed on the thumb drive. Index matches the folder." They nodded like people who appreciate someone speaking their language. We started with the subpoena. They explained the date range, the accounts, the vendors. They read off names, some familiar, some faint echoes from projects long past. "Walk us through the first irregularity you noticed," the younger lawyer said. I did, step by step, the pitch that went sideways, the access logs, the ghost file. They asked for dates, time, supporting documents. I gave them everything without pause. When we reached the client email, the one where Lisa told them I might be moving on, the older lawyer tapped his pen. "This is the kind of statement that without context is just office chatter. But with your logs and the metadata, it starts to look like something else entirely." "Like intent," Andrew said quietly. The lawyer didn't disagree. Carol interjected when we reached the vendor's off-channel communication. "We've got his statement in draft. He's willing to sign under penalty of perjury." "That will help," the younger lawyer said. They moved through the rest of my documentation. Every file, every suspicious timestamp, every quiet theft of credit. No one raised their voice. No one speculated. The table between us became a place where facts lived without needing adjectives. When we were done, the older lawyer closed the folder gently, like it was something fragile. "James, we'll be producing your materials as part of our compliance. You've done exactly what you should have. Document, preserve, report." "Not everyone does. Not everyone has to," I said. Andrew glanced up at that, and I could see in his eyes the unspoken truth. Plenty of people in this company would have folded under what Lisa had tried to pull. As we wrapped, the younger lawyer asked one last question. "If this expands, and it may, are you willing to be deposed?" "Yes," I said without hesitation. "Good," he said. "Depositions aren't about winning. They're about not losing." The meeting ended at 9:26. I walked out with Carol, the air in the hallway feeling lighter and heavier at the same time. "You know this isn't over," she said. "I know," I said. "The question is whether it ends here, or keeps going." Back at my desk, I opened my email to find a single-line message from the vendor, "Sending you something that will help." Attached was a PDF, a screenshot of a competitor's internal Slack channel. The message thread was short, but it stopped me cold. User Lisa's got the full Q3 deck from our company. Adjust branding, ready for next week. Date stamped. 8 days before she was walked out. I forwarded it to Andrew and Carol without comment. Andrew replied within a minute, bring it to legal. Now, by the end of the day, the lawyers had a new theory. One that stretched beyond workplace sabotage into something uglier. Intellectual property theft. It meant a different set of laws. A different set of consequences. That night, as I locked my apartment door, I thought about something Andrew had said in passing weeks ago. The truth is just the story that survives the paperwork. And now, I wasn't just surviving. I was steering. The next morning, the city felt sharper somehow, cold air that caught in the lungs, the kind that makes everything smell cleaner than it really is. I got to the office early again, not because I needed to, but because I didn't want anyone else setting the day's tone before I did. On my desk was a short email from legal. 2 sentences, plain but enough to quicken my pulse. Evidence you provided confirms unauthorized distribution of proprietary materials, proceeding with cease and desist civil action, HR to coordinate with external parties. Lisa's name was in the subject line. It wasn't bold for emphasis, it didn't need to be. At 9:10, Andrew called me into his office. He had a single sheet of paper in front of him. A copy of the cease and desist letter on firm letterhead. The language was clean and clinical, but between the lines was a professional death sentence. It demanded the return and destruction of all company property, threatened legal damages for any use of our materials, and copied both her new employer and their legal counsel. They'll cut her loose before lunch, Andrew said, matter of fact. Think they already have? I asked. Probably, he said. But this makes it official. What I didn't expect was the second envelope on his desk. This, he said, sliding it toward me, is for you. I opened it. Inside was a signed client contract. The one that had walked away after Lisa's interference months ago. The same client who'd reached out again when they heard she was gone. My name was listed as lead account manager. They came back, Andrew said. With a bigger budget this time. Said they prefer stability over flash. I read the phrase twice. Stability over flash. I'd take that any day. At 11:47, the building security quietly escorted Lisa into the lobby. I wasn't in the hallway, but I saw it from my office window, the way she held her shoulders, the cardboard box that looked even lighter than the day she left here. She didn't glance up at my floor. Maybe she knew I'd be watching. Maybe she didn't care. Her exit wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. Some endings are most effective when they're absorbed in silence. By mid-afternoon, the news had made its way through industry circles. A competitor's rep I'd known for years called me just to catch up. He didn't have to say it. I could hear in his tone that he was fishing for confirmation. I gave him nothing. Just talked about Q4 deliverables and how busy the holidays would be. Let the paperwork speak for itself. The civil suit would take months, maybe years. That wasn't my fight to finish. I'd already played my part. What mattered was this. Lisa would never work in this industry again without explaining the words unauthorized distribution of proprietary materials. No resume rewrite could make that disappear. That evening, as I shut down my computer, I noticed the subway token under its coaster. I picked it up, felt the cool metal against my palm, and thought about everything it had seen. Meetings where I'd kept my mouth shut, calls where I'd chosen my words like they were glass, days when I'd walked away instead of swinging back. Some people call it justice, I thought. I call it necessary. Outside, the city was loud again. Not the kind of loud that makes you flinch. The kind that makes you feel like you've rejoined it step by step. Somewhere behind me, in an office now missing one chair, the truth was filed, dated, and stamped. And in this world, that's the kind of ending that lasts. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments.